Good evening and welcome to Perspective. The response to PM's offer of bilateral talks at UN was met by unprecedented, unprovoked aggression and hostility by India, resulting in the death of 2 of our soldiers at the LOC and cancellation of the SAARC summit. In such a climate of war hysteria that is being propagated and created by India, how far will India go to further its propaganda? What are the implications of this hostile climate for our region, for Pakistan and India, the future of Pak-India relations, and particularly the solution to Kashmir? That's what we will be talking about today. I have with me Brigadier retired Khalid Umar, who is a defense analyst. Thank you for giving us your time, Brigadier Saab. Asad Baig, he's a media rights activist. Thank you for joining us today. And Musadik Malik Saab from PMLN, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Musadik Saab, to start off with you, how do you see this kind of war hysteria and warmongering that is being created by India? How do you see it impacting the Pak-India relations in the future and also particularly Kashmir?
I think it's very unfortunate. And I think it's very unfortunate because the only agency or agencies that are going to benefit from this situation are the terrorists. Right. All of the extremists and the terrorists, the strategic space for them is going to open up. Right. They'll run from one country to another, wreaking havoc. And through this warmongering or through this kind of posturing, safe havens would be created for them in the neighboring countries. Prime Minister was very upfront in his speech. He said that if this world were to be a global fabric or were to be woven into a global fabric, then you cannot have patches of extremism into it. Or you cannot have patches of terrorism onto it. Right. If you don't want terrorism, then you have to go to the root cause of the problem, and the root cause of the problem is Kashmir. Right. And what the Prime Minister did was talk about the Kashmiri rights, talk about basically the unfortunate act of state terrorism that's been going on in Kashmir.
The Prime Minister was very balanced, and the Prime Minister was a statesman, and he was very
Prime Minister was very forthright. Right. And he spoke about the Kashmir issue just the way it was. And ever since he's spoken about the Kashmir issue, what have you heard? You've heard about water problems and the water treaties. You've heard about Uri. You've heard about war or warmongering, or basically the skirmishes that are going on. Right. What is it that you have not heard? You've not heard anything about Kashmir. So the bottom line is that all of this posturing, which sometime on a given hour of the day becomes water and then becomes war-like situation, is basically a cover-up for Kashmir. Right. And our perspective is that we have treated cancer with Tylenol or aspirin for 70 years, and it cannot go on. Right. We have to look into each other's eyes and have a straightforward and honest conversation about the Kashmiris' rights. Pakistani perspective is the Kashmiris' perspective. Right. And it has been warranted by the United Nations. It has been warranted in all of our bilateral conversations. So unless we talk about it, this kind of warmongering would go on. The peace of the region would get compromised. The development of all countries are going to get compromised, and that's not good for anyone.
Musadik Saab is saying that, since the Prime Minister was very upfront and he talked about the Kashmiri rights, and he said that, we should have talks, but he extended the offer of bilateral talks between Pakistan and India towards reaching a viable solution in Kashmir. We've heard stuff like the Indus Water Treaty and like diversionary tactics. How far do you agree with that?
Absolutely right, but basically it's all Indian effort to take the attention away from the massive people's movement for freedom inside Kashmir, basically Valley and the other towns also, all over occupied Kashmir. So it's been going on for a very long time. There is a shutdown, which means they are suffering economically. Right. Even the fruit growers, they say they are suffering. Because that is exported to rest of India. Right. They said we will not send the fruit to rest of India. We will suffer because for us, freedom from India is most important. Right. And they are using pallets, and you see in small kids.
Of course, there are atrocities.
Movement from one place to another, within Srinagar, in Kupwara, in Pulwama, other main towns is very difficult. So to divert the public attention away from the massive freedom movement which is going on, they staged this Uri.
But Brigadier Saab, also from the massive freedom struggle that has been going on, and obviously it escalated after Burhan Wani, but don't you think it's also the factor, one of the main factors is also the fact that maybe the foreign policy that Mr. Modi was propagating has failed as far as Kashmir is concerned, and this is also because of that.
Definitely, because he adopted a very hawkish attitude right from his election campaign. The very first speech, by chance I heard it. He addressed Pakistan, he addressed Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. And in 2013, a few months later, none of our political leaders mentioned India as such, or the Indian Prime Minister. They did not. So they were domestic issues they were raising, and they were, in other words, they were more broad-minded. The last public gathering or jalsa, you can say, in Kerala state, where he made an offer that let's compete in reducing joblessness and poverty. As far as I am concerned, as a defense analyst, it was a cover-up. I knew that they are coming, and they will attempt, and they have attempted at 5 different places. And had there been weakness, they would have also tried to come across the line.
We will come and we will talk about that in detail. Asad, you are also a social media activist, and with your expertise in that regard, what do you think, the Indian media is really, is this media rhetoric? Is it being done to appease the media? And how far will India go to appease the media, if it is that?
I think, thank you very much. It's very important that we talk about this. First off, I see Indian media is just basically selling the situation to its viewers. And unfortunately, it sells in India. Any anti-Pakistan rhetoric really sells in India, and that's what the Indian media is doing. But what I'm more concerned about is the censorship, especially the internet censorship that is happening in India right now as we speak, especially in the Indian-held Kashmir. And if you allow me, I have the Facebook Transparency Report with me. And this report says that from July 2015 to December 2015, there were about 6 requests made by the Pakistani government to Facebook to remove certain online content. And in the same period, there were 14,971 requests made by the Indian government to Facebook to remove the online content. And this basically tells you what is happening. And yes, I agree, there's a population, Indian population is so much more than Pakistan, but still it's a very, very stark difference right there.
Yes, there's a stark difference.
And the friends that we have on the Indian side of Kashmir, they basically tell us the kind of horror stories that are coming from there. The mobile carriers are down, the internet is down, only there are a few government-owned internet lines which work in Srinagar, and that's very disturbing for me. And again, if you allow me for just 1 minute, the international organizations who basically work as watchdogs for media around the world, especially the Committee to Protect Journalists, all of them have condemned India on this. And CPJ on their website says the government of Indian Kashmir has a long record of failing to respond to physical attacks on the press. And they're very concerned on YouTube and Twitter, which is being banned in the Indian side of Kashmir. So this is basically the situation. And this is what we are much more concerned about, that the censorship is basically to block the narrative of people coming out of Kashmir.
So the reality doesn't go across. Musadik Sahab, the PM has also convened a cabinet meeting, I understand, and there is also supposed to be a national security meeting. Can you tell us a little bit about that also? And there's a joint session of parliament also?
There's a joint session of parliament as well. And obviously, we're going through some difficult times. This basically is right in the face of our foreign policy to have peace all around us and peace within Pakistan, and focus all of our energies on prosperity and development and growth and eradication of poverty. So we're very deeply concerned. But I think our desire for peace has been confused with weakness. And I think that we have to show a single face and a political face and a joint political face, which very clearly articulates our capabilities as well as our resolve to defend our country. So the Prime Minister has been taking stock of this emerging situation nearly every half an hour. And he's very confident and very comfortable with our military leadership and the level of preparedness of our military. Whether it's hot pursuit or it's cold start, we are completely capable of taking care of our country and of our boundaries. So have no illusion. However, we would like to sit and we would like to talk and we would like to promote peace, but we would not like to promote peace without discussing the issue that is stabbing us in the heart, or stabbing this region in the heart. And that issue is the right of the Kashmiris, and those rights will have to be negotiated and discussed with transparency.
Right. Brigadier Sahab, like Musadik Sahab is saying, the government is prepared to defend the right of Kashmiris left, right and centre and to go to every level to do so. And yet we also realize our own capability and that we are in our best optimum capacity to respond to any sort of aggression, any sort of hostility that India throws at us. But even so, in this kind of climate, what kind of sanity should prevail in the region? And I don't just mean Pakistan.
Within region, the bigger country, the larger country, and that's the one which is acting very hawkish, in a hawkish manner, very aggressively.
Right.
And the moment this Uri happened,
right.
Incident took place, they got together. Rajnath Singh, who's the Interior Minister, Home Minister, he had cancelled his visit to Russia a day earlier.
Right.
He was to leave on 18th. And why did he cancel his visit on 17th? That's very meaningful. Plus Manohar Parrikar, the Foreign Minister, and Mr. Doval, the National Security Advisor, and a hawk amongst hawks, you can say. They were getting together. They got together, in fact, immediately after the Uri incident. And the DGMO of Indian Army announced that India reserves the right to exercise its option, and we will respond at the place and time of our own choosing. Now, this came on 18th, the day of the incident.
Right.
And they have done it now after 11 days. In between, they wriggled out of, I would say, wriggled out of SAARC meeting.
But what have they responded to?
Yeah, well,
it's all baseless assertions by them.
Because when I hear, as a professional, when I hear the term surgical strike, that means air strikes, commando raids inside the other side's territory.
Right.
None of it took place.
Right.
And if at all, they must be attempting to cross on the ground, which I think at places they did, and they suffered tremendous amount of casualties. As far as we are concerned,
but our army has of course responded and responded in an
very
exemplary
well,
manner.
very well, mashallah. I as an ex-soldier, as an old soldier, I feel very proud, because to be ready at all times is very difficult.
Right.
So this two of Shaheed, one belongs to Gilgit, and the other boy is from Naik from Faisalabad. His body is already reached. The one from Gilgit was in Tatapani area. He discovered the enemy movement first, and he opened fire. So they had done their homework well. So they fired rockets at his position. So he died. There were about 5 boys who beat back a much larger effort by the Indians to come close and then engage. We have a tremendous weakness along the line of control, because our civil population lives right up to the line of control. Not so on the Indian side. They barbed wire. They had moved villages after 1965 war to some distance away. We never open up on their civilians because they are fellow Kashmiris, fellow Muslims.
Right,
and it hurts.
Even so, we did respond to them in an exemplary manner. Our army had responded.
Yeah, responded militarily.
Exactly.
They fired on our civilians too. Some houses are being shown in different areas where they opened up. Every time this is what they do. The civilians are not armed. Innocent, unarmed people, they go about their work. Daytime, night if they're there, then they're caught by surprise. It happened at night, 2:30, and it finished by about 8 in the morning.
Right.
So
I'll just come back and come back to you on that. Musadik Sahab, India has said that Pakistan will get isolated within the world if it continues its stance on Kashmir, essentially. But actually, Pakistan has gotten anything but isolated. We have Turkey supporting us, we have the OIC, we have China supporting us, we have Russian military coming in for exercise. How do you think this will pan out for India as compared to Pakistan? Of course, we're doing all right, I think.
Well, I think you've nailed it on exactly where it belongs. How would we get isolated? We are putting together an economic corridor. We are putting together a framework in which every neighboring country is a stakeholder. And if India were wise enough, it would understand that it can also be a stakeholder in that. So if you look at it, we have TAPI, which basically comes through Central Asia. So Central Asian, this is the gas pipeline project. So Central Asia has its stakes in Pakistan. We have CASA 1000, which comes from Central Asia all the way to Pakistan. This is basically the electricity project. So Central Asia is again a stakeholder, and Afghanistan is a stakeholder. We basically have the Russians would have access all the way to the warm waters for trade and so on and so forth, if we think about this sea project broadly. Afghanistan has a stake in that. Iran has a stake in that. We can potentially basically create a cluster of ports through Chabahar and Gwadar and Karachi if we think in a holistic manner, and we are thinking in a holistic manner. So all of our neighboring countries are stakeholders in the economic turnaround that we're trying to make. So how are we getting isolated? India also is getting investments from these countries, and we have no issues with that. We have no difficulty or concerns about India developing.
But
India
specifically with regard to Kashmir also, we have had support. I mean, US has just said that, you know, it would encourage both India and Pakistan to take part in talks.
It's not just the United States.
Right,
I mean, the human rights organizations are willing to send the neutral kind of groups to see if there are any violations. The United Nations is willing to send the troops. So I mean, all of a sudden, India will have to face this reality, and multinational corporations, which are very strict regulatory and human rights violation frameworks, they would find it enormously difficult over a period of time if India does not back off from this brutality and state-sponsored terrorism. So all of this shiny India or shining India, whatever that framework is, once the world begins to see the darker side of India, it would become difficult, it would be hurtful for them. And we don't want to hurt them. We're simply saying that let's have a fair dialogue. It's very unfortunate that SAARC has been called off or postponed or cancelled or whatever has happened, because this would have been a forum where we could have at least spoken about our issues, and we may have basically shrunk the space for the terrorist organizations and the extremist organizations, because I would like to say it again, we do not think just focused on Pakistan, think region. The proliferation of these extremist groups is going to hurt us. We have been hurting, and we've taken them on. Look at what we've done in North Waziristan. Look at what we did in Swat. Look at what we're doing in Karachi. We've been bleeding, and we've been fighting, and we've given an enormous sacrifice to isolate these groups and root them out. Now, to create a whole new space for these actors would be very unfortunate, and it's not going to affect us. It's going to affect the entire region, all of the neighboring countries. So I would say, watch out, de-escalate, begin to talk rationally, and talk about Kashmir as the starting point. This is the only pathway forward, and may the sane minds prevail.
Right. Asad, with regard to social media in particular, the kind of reaction, how will this narrative go forth? What kind of censorship have you, as a social media activist, seen, particularly with regard to Kashmir over time?
Look, internet is a global medium. And while private Indian media might be going with the Pakistani, anti-Pakistani rhetoric, internet could actually be used as a medium for the real narratives to come out. And platforms like Facebook, for instance, can play a very, very important role. Unfortunately, the role of Facebook particularly that we've seen in the past and now as well has been nothing but discouraging, especially for the Kashmiris.
Now, but why is that?
That's a very long debate. Some of the reasons is that Facebook primarily is registered in India as Facebook India Online, and they might be under the corporate criminal liability within India. And so basically they are liable to take any content off, on the instructions of the Indian government. That might be, it as well. Also, India is a huge market. Just in India, there are about 109 million Facebook users. And in Pakistan, we have about 25 million internet users.
But isn't it also true that the movement in Kashmir was recently fueled by Burhan Wani over social media? So
yes, it was.
So that also is a fact, whereas, like you're saying, there is censorship. But on the other hand,
unfortunately, that in itself has increased the censorship. So essentially, if you are a user, an internet user, if you put up the picture of Burhan Wani on Facebook, there are high chances that your account will be blocked or that particular post will be taken off. We've seen recently in Pakistan, the Facebook page of Jamaat-e-Islami, for instance, was taken off. And Jamaat-e-Islami happens to be, a huge political party in Pakistan. So essentially, if you see it properly, what essentially Facebook is doing is curbing valid, lawful political expression. expression in Pakistan. And that's nowhere legal, even under the US Rights of Bill. Bill of Rights, I'm sorry. So the role of Facebook, the role of internet is an extremely important thing, but unfortunately platforms like Facebook could like really, you know, play a positive role, but they're not doing it, unfortunately.
Brigadier Saab, John Kerry recently spoke to Sushma Swaraj also and said that, you know, and urged to de-escalate the situation. And also they have said that, you know, maybe India is not getting what they expected. Isn't that one perspective? Out of all the warmongering and war hysteria they have created, in effect, are they really? I don't think they're getting what they wanted out of all of this.
And not at all, not at all. Though I was very surprised, because I didn't expect a professional like the Indian DGMO to tell lies. I didn't expect. And he's lied that we have carried out surgical strikes. So I read a lot, I do a lot of research. Certainly I saw I checked on social media. They're talking about, then I put on my television and he was there and he was speaking along with another gentleman, I think must be Foreign Office, Indian Foreign Office. The two were sitting. He was speaking and he also spoke in Urdu, Indian DGMO. So I was surprised, why is a professional like him grossly, I mean, inaccurate statements he's giving. This sort of a thing means they're not concerned with their failure, which has occurred actually last night. And professionally, I say, we should be on our guard militarily. They don't do it, things get de-escalated, which makes us as Pakistanis very happy. We want peace, we want progress, we do not want tension. And talking about terrorism, twice this point was mentioned by Mr. Musadik. The TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, was being sponsored by the Indian presence in Afghanistan. Let me make it very clearly, that it was Pakistan which was on the receiving end. And about 66,000 deaths. And injured, nobody has calculated. Normally they were 3 times. And the people injured for life, losing limbs, etc., is a huge number. And the nation has shown its tremendous resilience. And even this, at this time, it's something very good is taking place. That the political parties have got to come together as one. And the government and the army or the armed forces and the common people. You heard interview. The nation is one, and formally by going for a joint session of the parliament and visible statements from all political leaders, forgetting about their internal differences and what was happening each day, even now, or may have happened tomorrow. They have spoken out. Mr. Shah Mahmood Qureshi went to Wagah border today, and the Indian side was all empty chairs, which was surprising. On the Pakistani side, it was a normal gathering as it happens every day. So the war is never the answer. You know, as a soldier, I used to go to my post in the northern areas in the Baltoro Glacier and other. When I used to go and ask the Subedars, etc., what is the situation, and they would use this term, Sir, aman hai. That means peace hai. Even a soldier desires peace. He understands what war is, what a bad thing it is. So for us, it is to de-escalate, tell the India to think twice again before venturing, and it is better to come for talks. They have actually missed a great opportunity by coming for SAARC.
Musadik Saab, like Brigadier Saab is saying, of course, India has missed a huge opportunity, and you were earlier saying how SAARC would have been a very good forum for us to actually debate on Kashmir and come to a viable solution. But the news has just come in that Indian High Commissioner was summoned in the Pakistan Foreign Office, and the killings of our 2 soldiers were condemned, and also it was said to him that India is actually a perpetrator of terrorism because Yadev was earlier caught by Pakistan and Pakistan authorities, and therefore, like you were saying, terrorism is a very relevant factor within the region, and it's likely to escalate. In such a scenario, are all our political parties, are we all standing on one footing with regard to retaliation and with regard to sanity in this kind of climate?
I think so. I mean, 100%. I think every voice that I've heard today has been basically promising the integrity of Pakistan and the integrity of our of our boundaries and so on and so forth. So I don't see any problems there.
Right.
We may have political differences. We are a democracy and we have many political differences within democracy. But if our kids' lives, our children's life, if the integrity of our country, if there's even a remote threat of it getting compromised, we all come together, and we have come together.
Right.
And this is an important message. You know, what is 2 soldiers dying yesterday is 2 people having shahadat for us. They were martyrs, and we are now 2 people short of 200 million people who are willing to do so. So it is going to be a very uphill task, a very difficult battle to fight. So my suggestion is, do not underestimate us. We are fully prepared, but we would like to have peace in the region. Let's try to de-escalate it. Let's try to have an open and a fair conversation which gets to the heart of the problem and resolves it for times to come, so that the entire region can move forward.
But in a situation like this, where when we talk about terrorism and they are perpetrating it, we have caught people who are perpetrating, Indians who are perpetrating terrorism, non-state and state actors even, but when we mention terrorism, they mention Balochistan. When we mention Kashmir, they mention in the Indus Water Treaty, and they want to unilaterally look at it again. How is that even possible?
You see, you have to understand that, you know, it is in their interest to create a comparison between Kashmir and Balochistan when actually there is none. It is not in our interest to speak about Kashmir and Balochistan in the same breath. We are talking about Kashmir. We are talking about a disputed territory. We have enough evidence that they have sponsored terrorism, or our neighboring countries, not one country, but multiple countries, have basically, their soil has been used, their apparatus has been used to perpetrate, do terrorism in Pakistan.
Right.
We have Kulbhushan Yadav. We have people in Karachi who were trained in India. We have so many acts of terrors, the threads of which go to our neighboring countries. We've been victims of terrorism. So we don't want to continue to do this. The blood of our children is not that cheap. We want to move forward, but we want to move forward, and the only way we move forward is with integrity. And so long as all of the countries in the region understand each other and respect each other and are willing to maintain and promote the integrity of individual countries, to that extent we would like to have peace and would like to promote it.
Right. Asad, coming to you, with regard to social media, how do you think that, you know, how do we get our voices to be heard if we have, like you're saying, a direct sort of bias coming in from social websites like Facebook? How do we do that?
Look, I think it's fair to mention here that a lot of voices are already coming out from India, and that's how we actually get to know what's happening.
Right.
So if you, in the recent past, if you read the stories that Guardian, for instance, has done, or various other news outlets have done, you'll understand what's happening there. But the very fact that they're doing stories on it, that means the voices are coming out. So I think that's a very good thing. But other than that, I think we really need to understand that the internet censorship is actually hurting the human rights cause in India. Not only the Kashmir cause, not about the victims in the Indian-held Kashmir, but actually the human rights cause. And I think international organizations can play a very important role here, and they have been doing so in the past. But I think that they would probably have to accelerate their efforts, advocating for more freedom, more internet freedom, more freedom to speech within India,
but
especially when it comes to
Kashmir. But you're saying that most of it is, they actually, it's about the funding, where it's coming from. And if it's coming from India, for example, then obviously we don't have a lot of room to maneuver things as far as social media is concerned.
Yes, look, funding is just one part of it, and Facebook is one very small part of internet. Internet is much bigger than Facebook itself. There are other platforms as well. There are other news sites as well. There are blogs. There's Twitter.
Right,
and there's various other things, right? So essentially, what we are talking about is, is internet censorship primarily. Facebook is just a very small part of it, although it's very important now. So what I'm saying is that these international organizations should and will have to accelerate their efforts in advocating, so reaching out to the policymakers in India, reaching out to the people who matter in India, and raising this internet censorship thing with them. This is extremely important, I feel.
Right. May I add something to this?
Yes, please.
You see, you have to understand, what is internet about? Internet is about freedom.
Right.
And if freedom is curtailed or clipped, then what would happen? The companies such as Facebook, which get branded as organizations or companies that are curtailing freedom, they shall die. They'll have no degrees of freedom left.
Right.
There'd be other organizations which would come into play, and they may or may not be registered in India. If the United States and the entire Europe has not been able to contain the internet space and put this censorship, then what is the likelihood that India is going to succeed at putting censorship? So let's not talk about a company, which is Facebook, no matter how important it is. If Facebook doesn't change its policies, whether it be in the wake of what Pakistan wants to do, or India wants to do, or Sri Lanka wants to do, or Bhutan wants to do, if they invoke these kinds of censorships, they're basically inviting competition. And that's the genius of internet. And therefore, I'm not terribly worried about it. The second point that I would like to maintain is that the country that gets hurt the most through censorship is the country that invokes censorship. So the most detrimental part is basically the cultural change that comes about in that particular country. So India should be worried about its own freedoms. India should be worried about its own integrity. India should be worried about its own culture. So therefore, I am not terribly worried about Facebook as one company being contained or not contained in the internet space. The entire machinery of the United States has not been able to contain the websites of all of these splinter organizations or radical organizations and so on and so forth. So what is the likelihood that India or any other country can do it? Zero likelihood. I'm not worried about it at all.
Right, and if you do, and even if they have censored Burhan Wani, post Burhan Wani, if it has actually...
I mean, Burhan Wani is basically, what is Burhan Wani? Burhan Wani is a legend. It's not a person who's fallen martyr. Burhan Wani stands for Kashmiri rights, Kashmiri aspirations, and Kashmiri current situation.
And no amount of force
not
the delete
Burhan
can
Wani
change that.
alone.
Right.
They can ban the word Burhan and Wani. What are they going to do about all of the other violations of human rights? What are they going to do about tens of thousands of people who've lost their sight and are blind now? What are they going to do about over 100,000 people who are lying in the hospitals, trying to struggle to just stay alive? What are they going to do about all of those hundreds of people, or 117, 20, however many people who've fallen martyr to this? So they can take off Burhan Wani, but can they take off all the brutality from the internet? Can they take off all the oppression from the internet?
Right.
The answer is enormously, enormously unlikely. Right. So unless the only way out is to create the space for freedoms, to create the space for rights, and let the Kashmiris have what is their fair and guaranteed right.
Right. Brigadier Saab, I agree with Musadik Saab when he says that you can censor the name Burhan Wani, but you can't censor the movement and the fact that the reality of Kashmiris and their plight will go through. But at the same time, don't you feel that the narrative of the Kashmiris has maybe not reached as much height as it perhaps should have?
Recently, it's being noticed.
Yes.
Because everyone, all of us used to talk that compared to Palestine, which was the in thing, everybody talked about it, the Western people. Kashmir was in the background, at a back burner.
Right.
Again, I would say social media has played a tremendous part in this. Just before I came, I just watching our TV, and Mr. Mujibur Rahman Shami, he said he talked to somebody on social media in Srinagar, and he said a few minutes back we have just attended the Ghaibana Namaz-e-Janaza of the 2 Pakistani soldiers who became shaheed, who martyred. So the linkage between the Kashmiri people and Pakistan is becoming stronger by the day, and whatever is happening is reaching there, and whatever is happening inside Valley or Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, is being known to the Pakistanis. Right. And increasing number of people, if you notice, if you go to Twitter, where immediately after a post is posted, a tweet is posted, everybody gets to know it, depending on what you want to watch. So increasing number of people in which I have noticed British analysts, Americans, even from countries which never spoke for Pakistan, they're talking about what has happened to India. He said reduction of the isolation of Pakistan. On 8th day, for the first time since Pakistan came into being, Russian army contingent came here for training. The Indians had raised an objection, to which the Russians ignored. And it was a big step for us. And I remarked, I said, Pakistan, instead of being isolated, has gained space. Turkey offered the Prime Minister, Mr. Erdogan met the Prime Minister in New York. And he said, we can send an observer delegation composed of Muslim countries to Kashmir to report on what is happening there, to which I am sure India will never agree. But these are the pressures being brought on them. Now the Western world is getting to know that Kashmir is a problem. Palestine and other places are also important, but Kashmir people are getting to know what is happening, the Indian atrocities in the Indian occupied Kashmir. As the days pass, it is to Pakistan's advantage and to Indian disadvantage.
Musadik, Malik Sahab, yes, you know, the narrative of the Kashmiris is getting across, like we just talked about, and yes, that the world is getting to know the plight of the Kashmiris. But at the same time, don't you feel that we are what can we do to change things? What do you think we can do? We've offered them dialogue. The Prime Minister's offered it at the UN level. And a lot of countries have said that, you know, like Ban Ki-moon has said that, you know, he's prepared to extend help. Like Brigadier Saab is saying, Turkey has also said, a lot of countries have said that they offer to extend help. But in the face of such an obstinate a dialogue, a person against across the border, what kind of a reaction, what can we expect? Even if we leave the military retaliation or our own response to that aside for 1 second.
I think you'll have to understand that if we believe that we went to the United Nations and raised this issue, and therefore in about 2 months period of time, there's going to be an independent mission which is going to look into it, and then within 7 months the Kashmiri problem would come to a resolution, then we are raising the expectations of the Kashmiris and will break their heart. I don't think we should do that. I think we need to be realistic about it, that it would take a persistent regime of communications over a period of time and all sorts of diplomatic and moral pressures to come to the table to begin the conversation about Kashmir. We've had a few opportunities which weren't framed well, but nevertheless we had a few opportunities where this issue could have at least seriously been, considered for a resolution. And they have missed on those opportunities, whether they were obstinate or not, but it's hurt the entire region. And we'd like to frame and create opportunities for a fair discussion and for a fair resolution. But it's not going to come through this kind of narrative or rhetoric where we say, well, what can we do? Well, what is it that we are doing? We have called the ambassadors of the OIC Kashmir group countries, and we have given them our representation and the dossier. We have basically gone to the Secretary General of the United Nations and we have given him the dossier. We have gone to the Security Council, all of the countries in Security Council called their ambassadors and given them the Kashmir dossier. We basically sent the dossier to every single country where we have our embassies and ambassadors, and given them not only the information about Kashmir now, but also about the Indian aggression. And we're requiring them or asking them to go and lobby for the Kashmiri cause in every single country where we have the embassies. We've put together these contingents of politicians, bipartisan groups from various political parties, and they're getting informed and they're going to various countries and they will be talking about not only the Kashmiri issue, but also the issue of infiltration and so on and so forth. So what we're trying to do is build a regime of communication, not a piece of communication or not a piece of information. And over a period of time, if we continue to do this, we're very hopeful that Indians would begin to see the merit in having a fair conversation. The conversation is not going to be devoid of Kashmir, and the conversation is not going to be hegemonic or dominated by one party or the other. And the conversation is neither about India or about Pakistan. The conversation is about the Kashmiris and the Kashmiri rights, and that's exactly what Pakistan stands for and Pakistan is promoting. So it's basically a marathon. let's not basically begin to define it as a 100-meter or 400-meter race, because that it is not.
Right. Asad, I think Musadik Sahab has summed it up very well. The kind of efforts that the government is making, I think, are unprecedented as far as Kashmir goes. But what I want to ask you is this, that, you know, there is a lot of rhetoric that we are seeing, a lot of warmongering that is coming across from that side of the border. Like I said earlier, is to appease their media, or it seems to be. So how far do you think the India will go to appease their media, or to perpetuate this sort of historic hostile environment that is coming up?
Look, frankly speaking, I see it a little differently, because I don't think the Indian government is trying to appease the media. It's the Indian media trying to appease the Indian public.
Right. Okay.
And like I said, and I've said it before as well, at the risk of repeating myself, that the anti-Pakistan rhetoric really seems to sell in India. And that's exactly what the Indian media is doing. Look, Indian private media is nothing about, it's just about profit making, like any other private media, even the Pakistani private media, right? So the only thing at this point that they care about is to milk the situation the most, as much as they can, and just earn profits out of it. But on the downside of it, the kind of narratives that they're creating are really, really hurtful, not just to Pakistan, but more so to India. Right. And that they need to understand. And it's just a matter of time that they understand it, because if they continue to do it, it'll essentially be building more pressure from the Indian public on the Indian government to resort to hostile acts like they've recently done, for instance. Right. And it's only going to hurt India more. So I think this is something that the Indian media needs to understand very quickly now.
Right, Brigadier Sahab, why this desperation to escalate things as far as India is concerned?
Basically, to take the attention away from what is happening inside Kashmir. That's a starting point for them. Diversion. And they've got other internal problems, a lot of problems. There are freedom movements going on, subdued, then again becoming active in Nagaland for last about 50 years plus, Nagaland. Right. Then Mizoram, low key insurgency. Then Assam, in Assam, the Assam movement, they are there. Then in Telangana there is a movement. Sikkim was taken by force by India. Sikkim, Bhutan, two similar countries, right. And they overran it. Just like Junagadh and Hyderabad was April 1948. So, and Bangladesh, East Pakistan was invaded and created by a military invasion of India. So they are used to it. They are a big country and they get away with it. Nepal, they blockaded last year, and they were desperate because many supplies, medicines used to go from the land. It is a landlocked country. Right. The Nepalis were very vocal on social media against India. And so the hegemonic, what was brought out by Mr. Musadik Malik, they have a hegemonic inbuilt attitude. When they talk to you, they talk in a position of superiority, so-called superiority. Right. This they have got to overcome, because Pakistanis feel that they are a very important country, and which we are, because of our strategic location.
Yes, our strategic importance.
And initially we were the largest Islamic countries, then we cut into two. But even now we are a very large country, very strong country. It is the only nuclear-powered Muslim country. And I would say we are the brains of the Islamic world. Right. We are the brains and the military power of the Islamic world. Right. A rare combination nobody has. We have the ability to excel in any known profession of the world. Right. So we want to be friendly. On social media, you can see they come to abuses, using particularly against our girls, which is I saw on Twitter.
Whether it's on social media or otherwise.
They said it has happened to you, and he was abusing our girl, and she said, "Why can't you talk in a normal manner?" Right. Yeah. So if somebody abuses, somebody raises his pitch, that means I was talking to him just before we walked in. He or she has lost a logical argument, and this they do, which is one-sided. I have never seen a Pakistani open up an argument with an Indian with abusing or using vulgar language. That's the difference between our nation and Indians. So that psychology.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. Yes, India remains hostile. Yes, India remains desperately so. And yes, India is refusing to look at the reality that Kashmir is a disputed fact between Pakistan and India. And yes, Pakistan is not willing to let this go. We want to sit down, we want to talk, And yes, we are a balanced nation. Our PM made a balanced offer and a he exhibited his statesmanship by saying that the two nations should sit together towards a resolution, a peaceful resolution of Kashmir. But at the same time, we know how to retaliate, and we know how to fight, and we know how to defend our own country. We know how to defend our territorial integrity. Therefore, but at the same time, we remain committed towards a viable, peaceful solution to Kashmir. Thank you so much for joining me today on Perspective.